Welcome to Inviting Oneness, a podcast where we explore true personal stories from friends and members of EquaSion. Stories where the illusion of separateness gave way to the deeper truth of our shared humanity. Oneness isn't an idea, it's an experience. And today we continue listening for it, one story at a time. Today's episode is with Danya Karram. Danya is a community advocate, longtime dialogue practitioner, and co-founder and president of Brilliant Advice. Here's Danya.
Well, I love the idea of having a conversation about oneness. And I think when we have a conversation about oneness, we have to also include the reality of separateness. Because unfortunately, I think they go hand in hand, and it's often contextual. It depends on where we are and how we're feeling. And I'm going to give you an example of what I experienced many years ago about oneness and separateness and how they can occur in the mind almost at the same time. Unfortunately, I think both oneness and separateness come from two emotions that we all struggle with, and that's love and fear. And this example, I believe, illustrates so clearly how love can overcome fear. So back in the late 90s, I was involved in a trialogue group. It was a dialogue group of people from various faiths, mostly Christians and Jews and Muslims. We actually had a Baha'i member as well. And it was centered around a group that was formed and exists in Ramla, Israel. It's called Open House. The long story about how Open House started, it's based on a beautiful book called The Lemon Tree. And if any of your listeners want to look it up, it's a wonderful read about how a Muslim Palestinian and a Jewish young woman coming from Europe and settling in at that time Palestine and newly formed Israel came to know each other through a shared home. Okay, so that woman, that Jewish woman, turned that home into a dialogue center for the multi-religious community that she lived in. There were ethnically Palestinians of Christian and Muslim faith, as well as Jews who all lived there. So back in the late 90s, someone from that organization came to Cincinnati and spoke to us. It was a young Palestinian man, and how they, in that community in Ramla, Israel, came together and created community. Well, a group of us here felt very moved by this young man's story, and we started our own group. That was, I think, 1999, and we became very good friends. We came together with the feeling of separateness, coming from various backgrounds, religiously and ethnically. But what came from a couple years of dialogue was the concept of oneness. We became very good friends. We found our similarities, our commonalities, and we found through dialogue that we could come together. We could overcome some of the fears that we might have had with engaging with people from different faith backgrounds, especially around the topic of Israel-Palestine. Still a very hot topic, unfortunately, and it was then. So we came together and we created this really cohesive group. And we decided we wanted to do something in our community to share what we had learned. So we did small dialogues, but we decided we were going to offer to bring a group of teenagers from this Open House community group in Ramla, Israel, to the United States for a summer experience. And this occurred in the summer of 2002. So it was after 9/11, okay? And our dialogue group went through all the conversations around 9/11 too. So we were a very strong, cohesive group, and we felt very strongly about bringing this group of teens together to the United States for a visit. So know that these teenagers, Muslim, Christian, and Jewish teens that lived together in Ramla, Israel, participated regularly since they were small kids in this dialogue group. It was called Open House, so it was a place where people could come together and talk. So not only did their parents come together, but they also came together as children. There was also a preschool there. So they were already experiencing oneness. They came from different backgrounds, ethnically and religiously, but they came together through years of dialogue and being together as a community of one. So here you had this planning group that was already a community of one, felt oneness. And you had this group of teenagers that felt oneness. And we wanted to spread that in the Cincinnati community. So our small group of members decided we were going to ask people to host these kids to stay here. It was about a week that they came to Cincinnati, and we were going to take them to Kings Island, and we were going to take them to a play in Cincinnati, and we were going to take them to a synagogue and a church and to a mosque. And we were going to engage in activities together with the local community, bringing teens from Cincinnati. But the prerequisite was if you were going to host a group of kids, you needed to host either boys or girls, and you had to host an Arab child and a Jewish child. Okay, ethnically Arab child, either Muslim or Christian, and a Jewish child together. No problem. We thought it'll be great. That way, the host families could experience what we've experienced and see these kids as kids and see their commonalities. Well, it's unfortunately very eye-opening to see some of the feedback that we received. Now, I want you to know, overall, the feedback was wonderful, but we had on both sides, on the Jewish side and on the Muslim side, okay, not the Christian side, I will tell you. And I want to go back to what I mentioned earlier about coming from a place of love and fear. So recognizing, which we didn't at the time, that many of the Jewish families came from a place of fear. Okay, understandably so. And many of the Muslim families or the Arab families came from a place of fear, understandably so, given the circumstances, the political circumstances, and their own personal experiences. So we had a Jewish family said, I'm happy to take Jewish kids or even a Christian kid, but I'm not comfortable with a Muslim child in my home. And we had Muslim families that said, I'm happy to take a Christian child and a Muslim child, but not a Jewish child. Now, like I said, it didn't happen often, but it happened. And that was really, really difficult for us as a committee. But we felt steadfast. If you're going to host kids, you had to host kids from various sides, various religious backgrounds. So the way we handled it was, thank you so much for your willingness to offer. However, our mission is to bring the kids together in your homes. We understand if that's not where you are right now, but we'd encourage you to come to some of the activities that we've planned throughout the week. And that completely diffused the situation. I don't know how we came across and how we figured that out, but we were, again, so mission driven and coming from a position of oneness, a feeling of oneness and love, that's how we reacted. So there was no argument. There was no putting people down or shaming them and making them feel bad. Because again, people come from a place of fear, typically for a reason. Well, interestingly enough, there were 3 families that took those positions, but we encouraged them and continued to speak with them to come to some of the activities. When they saw the kids in action, when they saw that these were children, they were teenagers. And frankly, if you looked at them as a group, you couldn't tell which ones were ethnically Arab, which were Jewish, which were Christian. You couldn't tell. They all looked the same. Every one of those families, by the end of the week, said, thank you for your patience. Thank you for including us. And we are really sorry and regretful that we weren't in the position at the time to take those kids into our home. And we wish we would have. We took them from a position of fear to love, I believe, which then became oneness. And many of those people stayed within our dialogue group and attended other activities for the next few years. So that's an example, I think, how we have to understand that the feeling of separateness comes from fear. And many times, again, it is understandably so. We are living in very difficult times. There's a lot of separateness because there's a lot of fear. What we do with that, I don't know, but I can tell you that if you can get together with like-minded people, come together with a common mission, you can bring others along. I firmly believe that because I saw it with my own eyes.
That's a beautiful story. A couple of things about the story that really strike me here. The first one is your insistence on not shaming or judging people who are in a place of fear. I think that is the overriding kind of impact your story makes. The other thing that I'm thinking about is you use this word dialogue, and I know you've been doing this work for a long, long time, but in kind of popular parlance, the word dialogue sort of means a lot of things. It means engaging with somebody who's your friend, who's your spouse, who's your family member. But when you're talking about dialogue, you have a particular understanding of what dialogue means. Could you just unpack a little bit what dialogue is and how it differentiates between like conversations and debates. And how are you understanding dialogue in the context of that work?
Well, again, in the context of the work that I've done over many, many years, it's been bringing people together with very different backgrounds, typically around differences of faith or the Palestine-Israeli issue. That's the context that I've worked within. I also did a lot of work after 9/11, going out into the greater Cincinnati community and dialoguing, speaking with people. So when I approach dialogue, you can't come and just preach. To me, dialogue means not teaching, standing up, but conversing with someone. You may have the same opinions or you may have differing opinions. And at some point, you have many same opinions, but you'll probably come across differing opinions to allow that space to be heard and to dig deeper into why people feel the way that they do. Whenever we engaged in dialogue over the years, over the various religious topics or political topics, we always had a set of guidelines that we would put forth about how we would be respectful towards one another. I've experienced, as we all have, that debate doesn't create oneness. It creates separateness, a winner and a loser. It's a point system. So if you're there to win a point, okay, that's not dialogue. That's not a conversation. It's difficult to explain. It's more of a feeling of coming with the concept of oneness, not of separateness. When I would go speak after 9/11, I never got up in front of the audience and discussed that I was different than others. I discussed, I'm an American. Essentially a second generation American. My father fought in World War II. My uncle was in the army during the Korean War. My grandparents came to this country. My parents were born here. So when I would speak to audiences trying to help create dialogue and understanding after the horrific attacks of 9/11, I came as an American, like the audience, similar. I didn't fake that. That's who I am. So that feeling of oneness came through. And I always had very, very positive experiences over the 500 and some talks that I gave after 9/11. Three negative ones, and I will tell you, I was being attacked, and my audience members stood up and defended me. I didn't have to because they saw me as one of them. When I was attacked, they were attacked.
I really appreciate that. I think the intention of dialogue is oneness, is understanding, is to learn, is to be in a mutual conversation. That makes a ton of sense to me. I think the intention of debate is something altogether different. The other thing that was coming up for me here is that I've done some dialogue work as well, and I often run into folks who aren't quite ready to do the work. Maybe it's not quite at the level of they're not ready to host child from a tradition different than theirs, but you get resistance. And that highlights the reason to do it in some ways, but also it's difficult in those situations to not have some level of internal judgment towards that person, at least
Mm.
for me. And so I wonder, as you're in these spaces, how do you cultivate the capacity to have empathy for the lived experiences of folks that do generate that orientation of fear? What does it look like for you to be able to show up in a way that allows a non-judgmental approach to them?
Well, I'm not perfect, and I will tell you that I try not to judge, but we all do. So I think we have to realize that we are human, and these are emotions, and we have emotions for a reason. So when I'm struggling with not judging, okay, I am trying to put myself in their shoes to understand why they feel that way. We typically don't have feelings unless we have a lived experience that has caused us to have those feelings. Again, when people have separateness, there's a fear behind it, and it's trying to understand that fear. Sometimes you can try to put yourself in someone's shoes. You really never know why somebody acts the way they do. Sometimes they don't know why they act the way they do, even if asked, they can't articulate it. But I think as a human, we have to understand, number one, that we have these feelings ourselves. And if we know we have them, we have to understand others have them too and give them that. And I hate to be cliche, but give them that grace, give them that space as a human being. None of us are perfect. All of us have a crazy monkey mind, as they say, which crazy stuff goes on in your mind. It's Learning to dialogue, learning to connect with others is learning to harness those natural human feelings and put them in perspective. So you have to understand, we struggle with it, others do too. And not everyone is in the same place. So I've found that it's easier to be with more like-minded people. We're already there. We go along, we can do so much more with like-minded people because we set an example. By setting that example and having success, others want it. They sense your happiness, your oneness. That's what we struggle with all the time, separateness and oneness, right? So when you're whole and you've got a great group and it's a wonderful feeling, others want to be part of it. It's waiting until they've decided they want to join you, and they typically will. And a perfect example is the Festival of Faiths. You have a group of people that come together to feel that oneness and invite others to come and just sample it. And they can sample it, dip their toe in and see if they like it. And I'm sure others, those people that visit have a feeling of that one. They get it, and then they go and share it.
Yeah, I love the promo for the festival. It's great.
I love the festival.
One more question for you as we go. Thanks so much for your time. It's a moment right now that we're living in that is just rife with fear and division and polarization on so many different levels and in so many different domains. For the folks who are listening to us talk, who are listening to you, do you have any encouragement for them as to what it could look like for them to choose love over fear in their life? Maybe like today.
It's so hard because on every level, local politics, national, international politics, I mean, it's all playing on us. It's all so difficult. What I find helpful is being with like-minded people. We need to hold each other up because, they say you're preaching to the choir, but guess what? The choir needs to hear it to keep coming to sing. Okay. So we need to keep lifting each other up and being with each other. Number one. Number two, recognize that unfortunately, this is the human experience. And if we look back at history, there are these cycles. And we go through these cycles, and we are unfortunately in the end of a cycle right now where we're creating a new world. And going through this is scary. And there's a lot of fear, and people are acting in many ways. The one thing that I think can help us is that if we look back through history, humans have figured out a way to adapt. No doubt that we will figure out a way to adapt. So while we can get caught in the short-term noise, and this is horrible, fearful noise, and it has real impact on people's lives, sometimes horrifically, as we see play out every single day. Over the long run, we will figure out how to adapt. So I think you need to get in your own headspace and understand that these short-term fears and reactions are normal. We need to look more at the long term. We're in a cycle. We'll come through it. Hopefully, most of us will. This is our human experience, and we can't ignore it.
Thanks for joining us on Inviting Oneness, where we share real stories of connection that dissolve the illusion of separation and reveal our common humanity. If this episode moved you and you'd like to get involved, visit us at EquaSion.org. Until next time, may we keep inviting oneness within ourselves and with one another.